Now it's our turn towards Secretary Defense R&D and Chairman DRDO, Dr. Samir Kamat. As you are all aware, in his time, I think DRDO has made some phenomenal success, and as they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we have seen it during Sindoor. The game changers were Akash, game changer was BrahMos. We all know it, and both clearly are DRDO's, ultimate products, if you will, as we speak today to the country. Apart from that, not much spoken about are DRDO's achievements in terms of the silicon carbide wafers, gallium nitride transistors, and a whole range. And in fact, the new generation strategy which Dr. Kamat has evolved and has spoken about at a number of places on where he sees DRDO evolving into the next generation, involving all of AI, ML, directed energy weapons, quantum, in a way mirroring what the army chief just said, I think shows the common understanding and common purpose with which our leadership is working. So with that, I would request Dr. Kamat to speak to us on enhancing collaboration, co-development, and co-production. Not quite clearly your charter, but nonetheless your thoughts. Thank you, Dr. Kamat.
General Dwivedi, General Saha, Ambassador Chinoy, Air Chief Marshal Chaudhary, and ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to all of you, and I'm indeed honored and thankful to Ambassador Chinoy for giving me this opportunity. I think General Dwivedi has made my job easier, and I'll keep my speech short so that we have more time for Q&A. As you are aware, gentlemen, we live in interesting times. We have a geopolitical churn going on. We are moving from a unipolar world to a multipolar world where India is going to be one of the strong poles. We are also in an era where several disruptive technologies have emerged, which are having a disproportionate effect on military capabilities. We are also in an era where technological changes are so rapid that if you don't keep pace, you are going to be outdated by the time you decide and develop those technologies which are required. So if we have to meet these emerging challenges, we have to look at different models, or a model which is different than what we were employing. If you look at what has been happening in the country, we had a fairly siloized system where we had DRDO doing R&D, our industry doing mostly production, academia doing their own R&D, whether that was relevant to our needs or not. And more or less the outcome till recent years was we were a major importer of weapon systems. 60 to 70% of our weapon systems, sensors, platforms used to be imported. This is changing, and I'm glad to say that last year, I think more than 90% of all orders that were placed were for indigenous systems. If we have to win the battles of the future, we have to transition to indigenous systems and indigenous capabilities. Because if your dependence is there on foreign systems, you will not get the desired support during a conflict. And if you look at the example of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, what works today does not work in 15, 20 days. That's the kind of rapid changes which are happening both in offensive and defensive systems. So you need inherent capabilities if you have to address the challenges of future battlefields. So the first thing we need to do, if you look at today our R&D budget, we spend about 5.5% of our defense budget on defense R&D. If you look at countries such as China, US, they spend between 10 to 15% of their defense budget on R&D. So the first change which we need to do if we have to be competitive going ahead is to increase our defense R&D budget. And I'm glad to inform all of you that Honorable Raksha Mantri ji has promised us that over the next 5 years, we will move from 5% to 10%. But if you see the way technologies are evolving, it is not going to be enough just to do defense R&D. As a nation, we have to improve our R&D capabilities and spending, because in a lot of these technologies, the civilian sector actually is ahead of defense. If you look at AI, communication, semiconductors, in all these critical technologies, the civilian sector is far ahead of the military sector. So we have to increase the spending on civilian R&D too. Today, as a nation, we spend 0.67% of our GDP on R&D. Countries like China, US spend 2.5% of their GDP, and they have a bigger GDP than us. Countries such as South Korea, Israel spend more than 4% of their GDP on R&D. So that is another area where we have to seriously look at if we have to compete in the future. And there I request, if there are anybody here from the private sector, the private sector has to look at increasing their R&D spend. Today, of this 0.67% that we spend, 70% of that is spent by the government. The private sector spends only 30% on this overall 0.67%. So that has to increase significantly. It has happened to some extent in the pharmaceutical sector, but it has to happen in all the sectors if the country has to remain competitive going ahead. So that's the second thing which we need to do. The third thing which we need to do, as I said earlier, we have to break the silos. We have compartmentalized ourselves too much. We have to see how we can work seamlessly across organizations. We have to see how we can best utilize all the resources that are available in the country for our needs. This siloization results in far less optimal use of the resources that we have. Of course, there are organizational barriers, there are issues of IP, there are issues which we have to overcome when we need to do this. But I think we have no choice. We have to find mechanisms so that this siloization is broken down. And I think it has started happening, and I'm sanguine that over the next few years, this will increase dramatically. So from these broad points, let me now tell you what we are doing in DRDO. So in DRDO, we are aware of these challenges. And this year being the year of reforms in the MOD, we have tried to implement some of the reforms so that the issues that I mentioned are overcome. So the first thing that we have done is that any system development we do, which is on mission mode basis, that is based on a AON from any of the services, we have now decided that we will have two industry partners, which we call them as development cum production partners. We had started this process of DCPP in 2018, 2019. We were mostly having one partner. But now, in the interest of the technology absorption increasing, as well as the services having a choice between two partners so that the cost also is kept in control, we have now decided that for all our system development projects, we'll have two DCPPs. And these two DCPPs are chosen purely on a competitive basis, and we don't distinguish between the private sector and the public sector. Everyone has the equal opportunity, and it's only on the commercial basis that we do selection. Of course, once the technical criteria are satisfied by the industries. So by this, we hope that this technology transfer process, which used to take time, because once the development process is over, then we used to handhold industry for the TOT, which would then result in delay in induction, would be avoided. Because if the industry works with us right from the start of the project, they would absorb the design better, they would absorb the technology better, and then any upgrades that would be required, any incremental improvements in the system that would be required, would be handled by the industry themselves. This would free up DRDO scientists who are otherwise locked in to support that system over the entire life cycle of the product, free to look at newer technologies. So this is the first thing that we have ensured. We have also opened up all our IP to private sector and public sector. So whoever wants to take our IP can take it, build upon it, and deliver newer products. So we have freed that up. Again, we hope this way the industry will also be energized to take up further development on existing IP. We have also now, we had a mechanism called Technology Development Fund, which was being used to fund R&D in industry. This was mostly initially restricted in its first few years to basically indigenizing components, subsystems in already inducted systems of the services. But we have now broadened it, and it can be used to develop cutting-edge technologies. We had a committee under the leadership of Dr. Saraswat and Dr. Kakodkar, and they have given us a mechanism by which we can fund cutting-edge R&D in industry. One of the challenges of funding cutting-edge R&D in industry was who will be accountable for the failure. Unlike DARPA in the US, which has a mandate from their Senate and Congress, where if failures occur also, they don't have to answer to the Senate why they have caused loss to the taxpayer. In fact, if you look at only 10 to 15% of DARPA projects succeed, because they really look at moonshots when it comes to technologies. We don't have such a mechanism in India. DRDO, if our projects fail, we have to answer to CAG. We have to answer to Parliament why loss has been caused to the government. But R&D has to be looked at as an investment, not as an expenditure. Because even if a project fails and you fail fast, the lessons that you learn from that R&D can be used in several other places. So this mechanism, hopefully, we are now looking at also a separate chapter for R&D in our GFR. Secretary DST has been tasked to come up with such a chapter, and I hope this will happen soon. This will then help us in funding cutting-edge R&D in startups, MSMEs, even large industries, which will then speed up our innovation. Because if you look at innovation, the larger the organization gets, innovation becomes slower. Because necessarily bureaucracy comes in, because if you have to run a large organization, you have to have structures. So innovation is best done in startups, MSMEs, which are very flexible. It is driven only by passion, not by structures meant to control efficiency, control expenditure, which necessarily is true in all large organizations, whether in the government or in the private sector. So this needs to happen, and I'm sure in the next couple of years, this change will also happen in the country. So this is with respect to industry, how to get the industry to do R&D, how to get our startups and MSMEs to do innovation, quick innovation, that is converting existing technology for different use. But we also have to make sure that our academia starts contributing to what is necessary for the nation. For this, we have started 15 centers of excellence in prominent academic institutions. And for each of these institutions, we have defined domain areas. And this is a hub and spoke model. So just because a center of excellence is in one institution and the domain area for that is defined, doesn't mean that they can work only on those domain areas. And it also doesn't exclude other academic institutions for proposing projects in those domain areas. So it's a hub and spoke model. And we hope that this will promote a R&D ecosystem which the Caltechs and the MITs and the Stanfords created in the US. So this is, and earlier our academic funding also used to be very limited. We used to fund 50 lakhs, 1 crore projects. It's not that we were not funding projects in academia earlier. But we are now looking at much larger projects. We have now given projects worth even 50 crores, 70 crores to academia to develop critical technologies. And in these centers of excellence, we are calling them DRDO Industry Academia Centers of Excellence. So the model we are looking at in these centers of excellence is that the DRDO labs, the industry and the academia can work together. At lower TRLs, mainly the work will be done by academia. As we move up the TRL chain, then the lab and the academia will work closely. And then subsequently, once we reach TRL 5, 6, the industry will play a bigger role. So we expect this will speed up the technology development, which is the need of the hour. So these are some of the steps that we have taken. We have taken a lot of other steps to improve efficiency within DRDO labs. We have started 5 young scientist labs where even the director is below the age of 35. We hope that these young scientist labs will become the equivalent of startups within the DRDO ecosystem. All these young scientist labs have been given these disruptive technology areas like AI, quantum technologies, smart materials. We are opening a new one on man-unmanned teaming technologies. So These are some of the steps that we are taking to keep pace with the emerging scenario. But what is finally needed is a change in the mindset. All these steps are essential, but not sufficient. Finally, we need a change in the mindset in the country. We need a change in the mindset that everything you do has to succeed. It will never happen that everything you do will succeed. We have to have a mindset that if it doesn't succeed, we close it down and not consider it as a loss to the government or loss to the taxpayers. We have to have a change in the mindset that indigenous systems will not compete, and Operation Sindoor has been a good example where it has been shown that indigenous systems also do well in wars. We have to also move, because the theme of my talk was supposed to be on co-development, co-production. We have to look at international collaborations also. Because a lot of times, if you want to speed up development, you have to look at partnerships. And BrahMos is a good example where we had a partnership with Russia. MRSAM is an example where we had a partnership with Israel. These are successful systems. So we have to look at models where we have to work with like-minded countries to do faster co-development. We also have to look at co-R&D, and we have recently started a lot of MOUs, or we have inked a lot of MOUs with countries such as UK, France. We already have a strong R&D collaboration with Russia, with the US, but we have now increasing the number of countries where we can do co-R&D, especially in these disruptive technologies. Co-production is out of the ambit of DRDO, but I think co-production also has to be looked at if we have to faster induct these systems into our services. So I think my time is up. It's 10:30 and I'm free for any questions. Thank you.